Christ went to the lepers. Christ touched the prostitutes. Christ fed those who were marginalized in so many ways. And it was time that we reclaim that once again. Why are we not doing that?
In Grace, Unbound, the Sacred Activism of an Orthodox Bishop, His Grace Bishop Demetrios shares a deeply personal and powerful story of ministry, one shaped by compassion, conviction, and a profound commitment to living out the gospel. From walking alongside a man on death row to launching his first Orthodox Christian AIDS ministry in the Western Hemisphere, Bishop Demetrios offers a compelling vision of sacred activism rooted in the Orthodox faith. Welcome, Your Grace.
Thank you, Father. It's an honor and a pleasure to be with you again.
Let's start out with maybe the obvious question. Why did you decide to write this book? And what do you hope for readers to learn and appreciate from it?
I think it's important, first and foremost, to understand that the book is meant for a wider, non-Orthodox audience. So I'm hoping that it will gain some witness into the truth of Orthodoxy in a contemporary fashion, not to be viewed as an antiquated church with beards and incense only, but something that we're reclaiming our social activism, our movement to pursue righteousness and justice. I think now, especially now, in this day and age when we're living, people are thirsting for that sense and that understanding. One of my favorite philosophers is George Santayana, and he had a very famous quote in his work, The Life of Reason for the Phrases of Human Progress. And in that, you know the quote, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. So we need to remember the past and move forward, reclaiming our heritage and our roots. Everything that St. Basil did, all the outreach that Byzantium did to the marginalized, I think sometimes gets forgotten. And it's important now more than ever to reach out to the marginalized who are being attacked, really. And that was the vision of Christ. He was marginalized. And I think that we need to respond to the Christ in every human being, no matter what their background.
Your Grace, the book highlights your transformative encounter with Andrew, a man on death row. What went through your mind when you first visited him? And how did an Orthodox perspective, viewing him as a human being made in the image of God, shape your response to his situation, and especially knowing the gravity of his crime?
The gravity of the crimes he was accused of. I don't believe Andrew was guilty of that particular crime that he was executed for. I also believe and know for a fact he wasn't a choir boy. He did some horrible things. He was messed up with some horrible people. But I got a phone call from a very pious woman named Theodora, a very typical Greek church woman who I didn't know was so involved in prison ministry. And she was visiting him for over 2 years. I didn't really remember the crimes. They were gruesome, horrible crimes. Uh, Talking about murder and dismemberment of women on the Gold Coast area, right by the Metropolis House at the time, in the early 80s. The group was called the Ripper Gang or the Ripper Crew. So I was kind of like intrigued, and now it's putting all my training, if I had any training in this area, or all my calling to the priesthood into being challenged and into check. Because now I'm asked to do something outside of liturgy, outside of chanting, outside of theological discussion, and put that theology and that belief and that faith into action. So I had to, and got to the prison after setting everything up, but he had been already mellowed by Theodora. So from the hardness, I encountered a man that wasn't a monster that everyone said he was, but he was a person like you and I. And to see him and to remember that first encounter with him was very moving. I was very emotional leaving. Thank God I had people with me. Theodora came with me, and Fred Chapekis, the lawyer from the metropolis, came with me and drove me. It's in the beginning chapters of the book. But to try to see the image and likeness of God in a person behind bars was challenging at first. But then if you remember and think about it, Christ spent 3 days on death row. And the famous icon of him in shackles on death row, falsely accused, he was innocent of all sin, of all crime. And much like, unfortunately, the state of Illinois, at that time, 11 people had been exonerated, some within 2 days of their scheduled execution because of mistakes and because they found the real perpetrators of the crimes. So we were undergoing in Illinois some massive attention to this thing, this barbaric practice of the death penalty. And it was important for me then, after meeting Andrew, to do something, to be moved to action, to be
Right.
moved to action by this person who went to the same parish as I did. I didn't know it because came from a huge parish, the Assumption Church on the west side of Chicago. In the 80s and 90s, we had 3 liturgies on any given Sunday. So we had 100 altar boys. There was no way I knew him. But he's about the same age, and we grew up in the same area, and his life took one path and mine took another. So it was an interesting juxtaposition. But I think Andrew left an indelible mark on me because it was the meetings and to see Christ in shackles, regardless of what he did or didn't
Right.
do. He was accused of it. I don't believe he was guilty of that particular crime, but I also don't believe we should have executed him or anybody.
Were these encounters face to face, or did you have to be behind glass when you met with
No,
him?
actually, they were face to face. It was interesting. Described in the book. He was brought to a visiting room, and there's 4 chairs bolted to the ground
Mm.
on a table, which is bolted to the ground as if, and 3 of the chairs said visitors stenciled in, and one said inmate. So he had to sit at a particular table, a particular chair, I'm sorry, and I did too. But I stood up when he walked in, and his hands were shackled, and he sat down. The guards were very, very kind and accommodating, and we met face to face and spoke like you and I, but actually face to face, yeah.
One of the most moving parts of your story, Your Grace, is your ministry to people with HIV/AIDS in the early 90s. What led you to take on that work at a time when there was so much fear and stigma, even within the church?
Well, remember, we started the Bishop's Task Force on AIDS in 1992. Pandemic had reached its height, and our church was doing nothing, not preparing her priests, not producing any literature. And fortunately, with the blessings of Metropolitan Iakovos, I was heavily involved in ecumenical interfaith work in Chicago. And through my work with fellow Christians and non-Christians, I was awakened to the fact that we need to do something. But that was on the back burner. It wasn't until a real person came forward, his name is Bob or Charalambos, who called the office asking for a priest to visit him because his priest wouldn't. And when I spoke to him, I said, well, why won't he visit you? If you're sick, he said, well, I have AIDS. So that struck me at the core. Okay, he has AIDS. But we know how it's transmitted, or do we? Did we? Immigrant priest at the time that was called. We didn't know. Our church was a little behind the 8 ball, I think.
Yeah.
So I said, I'll come. I was just ordained a priest in March of 92. So by April, when I met with Bob the first time, I encountered a frail man falling apart and ready to die. His mother wouldn't touch him. The whole house was covered, all the furniture with saran wrap, not the plastic that Yaya used to have on the couches when you stuck to it
Right.
when you were little,
Right.
but we're talking about saran wrap. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And I was led to the kitchen. I was told, sit here. And he came in, and the one thing he told me was that he missed his mother touching him and hugging him. So it was important to me now to respond in our traditional way. He kissed my hand. We had lunch together. Before lunch, I'm sorry, I asked if he wanted to receive communion. He did. And I think his parents were amazed and shocked that I would be so affectionate and not afraid of contracting the virus. Well, I had already known that you can't get it this way. Okay. So it's time now with that, not to be angry with the priest that didn't see him, but to educate the priest that wouldn't see him. So we started the Bishop's Task Force on AIDS in order to educate the clergy first and foremost. And then we moved on to advocacy and support for the Orthodox Christians who were impacted and living with HIV and AIDS. It was a challenging time.
Mhm.
I think a little more challenging even than COVID. It was a different thing. It was, we're talking about a infectious disease that's transmitted through sexual activity, through predominantly gay sexual activity, intravenous drug use,
Mhm.
and having sex with professional sex workers. So not really a wholesome um, way of contracting the virus. But we had to sit and say, look, this is a virus. This is a disease. Our people are suffering. Our people are sick.
Mhm.
So what are we going to do? Are we going to sit back and say, oh, no, we can't touch them because they're impure? No. Christ went to the lepers. Christ touched the prostitutes. Christ fed those who were marginalized in so many ways. And it was time that we reclaimed that once again. St. Basil built orphanages and hospices and took care of the orphaned and the widow. Why are we not doing that? Was the thing that went through my mind. And thank God Metropolitan Iakovos of blessed memory had that same compassion and insight, probably more than I did. And he was interesting because every time a new article would come out on HIV and AIDS. In the morning when I went to my office, it was on my desk, clipped out. We didn't have the internet then. So it was a clipped out article, either in Greek or in English, and that was his way of contributing. But the task force was composed of people from all walks of life, not only Orthodox Christians, but non-Orthodox and non-Christians, so we could understand and how to educate. People, Catholics, Lutherans, Protestants had already done this. So we benefited from their mistakes, actually. So
Yeah.
it was good that we waited, but we really had to move. We had to do something.
Mhm. Well, there are many times, as I'm sure you know better than I, that we are reactive rather than proactive.
Mhm.
So it is possibly even a miracle that you were able to do what you did. But let me probe a little bit into your heart, if I might, and ask
Sure.
you the question about how did your Orthodox faith form and sustain your response to both the AIDS crisis and the death penalty issue? I mean, were there saints, prayers, teachings
Mm.
that guided you?
First and foremost was the teaching of our Lord in Matthew 25. We hear it every meat fair Sunday. Do we live it? Feed the hungry, clothe the naked, visit the sick, visit those in prison. And it's not something like we need to have a foundation, a nonprofit, and reports and applications. No, it means give a hungry person a sandwich, give them a cup of coffee, give them a hug, be with them, walk with them. So Christ's message in Matthew 25 has been one of my guiding uh, forces, bases of my ministry. And the other one is, of course, St. Basil and his outreach and what he built in Byzantium and what he did. It's interesting because people in the church who I didn't expect to be so antagonistic and so threatened at first
Mhm.
surprised me. But their transformation after their parishioners had encountered it, or someone in their family was HIV positive, or someone in their family came out as gay, or someone in their family was wound up on the wrong side of the law, then
Mhm.
then we look and say, oh, we have a task force. Oh, we have someone working in capital punishment. But until it becomes personal, they don't respond the way that we should. And I probably didn't either at first. Someone accused me in an ecumenical circle, the Roman Catholic Bishop of Joliet, he's passed away since, said to me, the only reason you're involved with capital punishment because the last guy executed was Greek Orthodox. I said,
Oh,
yes, you're absolutely right. That led me to this work.
right.
But I haven't continued the work because of that. I see the injustice and I see the fact that our system is beyond broken. And I see the fact that these people are people made in the image and likeness of God. And we cannot. If we are pro-life as Orthodox Christians and Roman Catholics, then we're pro-life from womb to tomb.
Mhm.
We're pro-life from before birth, we're pro-life during life, and we're pro-life at the end of life. So we don't have a right to kill, be it the preborn or be it those condemned. We can't put people into categories of innocent and sacred and then guilty and profane. That was done during the Second World War by someone else who
Mhm.
he called for a Juden rein Germany, a Jew clean Europe,
Right.
not a Jew free, not Juden frei, but Juden rein.
Mm.
So we think we want to be pure, but we got to get our hands dirty too.
Yeah.
We have to pick up those broken pieces and walk with those people and our people.
And that's frightening for many people. Like you say, unless it's personal, unless you feel it, unless someone in your family, your parish, you kind of say, oh, well, that's okay. They can take care of it. But when it
Mhm.
hits home, it hits hard, like a smack in the face.
And it's good. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not happy that people were impacted with HIV and AIDS, but it was a time that we didn't know anything. We were afraid.
Yeah.
And if you think back on the COVID pandemic, we were afraid then too.
Yes.
But think of the way COVID was transmitted was we didn't know.
Yeah.
It could have been in the air, it could have been a sneeze.
We
Here
didn't know.
we finally found out. I just want to mention one thing about the
Sure.
task force in HIV. At the time, 92, we established it. If we had a good run, maybe 10, 15 years, we were always hoping for a cure. But then we realized after the first couple of years, no cure is coming for political reasons, for whatever reason. Then we said, well, our prayer is going to be that it becomes like a chronic disease.
Mm.
And today, I see television commercials advertising drugs that make it a chronic disease. In 1992, we never thought we'd see a commercial, take this vaccine and take this pill and don't worry. Then it was a death sentence. People were dying in 6 months of contracting the virus. We were afraid. So our prayer was heard and it has become a chronic disease, and you can live a full life. That doesn't mean you should go out and try to contract the virus, but at least we made great progress as a society.
The book describes a painful tension between a desire for punitive justice in our society and Christian mercy. How have you approached that struggle, and how should we as Orthodox Christians approach it?
Oftentimes you hear the cry, we want justice.
Mhm.
Quite frankly, the death penalty is just. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It's
Mhm.
not righteous. And if we're going to be righteous before God, then we have to embrace mercy. So we need to embrace mercy and righteousness above justice. We're human. We make mistakes. Don't tell me that over the course of the death penalty's inception, who knows when, to today, that we haven't made major mistakes.
Yeah.
Look back at the Salem witch trials. Do you really think they were real witches that were being executed? No, they were human beings that maybe had a different sense of spirituality than we did. So I think the approach the struggle between justice or rather righteousness and justice to look towards righteousness. Now, do I want to open the prison gates and let everyone go free? Absolutely not. Some
Mhm.
people deserve and should be in prison for the rest of their lives. But this means that there's an ability for metania,
Mhm.
for confession, for repentance, for return. And also, what if we as a society made a mistake? Death penalty is kind of final. You can't say, oops, sorry. You
Yeah.
know, my father was a very strong man, and he was pro-death penalty, very much so. But through him, I learned to be anti-death penalty because he said once when the death penalty was reinstated in the 70s, we have to be really sure, he used another expletive, that we're doing what's doing. If we're not, we shouldn't do it.
Mm.
So that said, I said, he's right. We
Right.
need to be really sure. We can't be. We can't be sure. So I think I approach it with a sense that we're all broken, we're all sinners, we all deserve the condemnation of death, if you will, but we look to God and we look to his mercy and righteousness. So as opposed to justice and the law. My second favorite, or tied with Matthew 25, is the gospel lesson with all the woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. But the one part that sticks out is the part that says, you tithe mint and dill and cumin, but forget the weightier matters of the law, like justice and love and mercy. These you ought to have done without forgetting the others. So you got to do both.
Right.
We have to,
Yeah.
society needs to be protected from people that are dangerous, that have created and committed heinous crimes. But how is the death of that person, the murder, the state-sanctioned murder of that person, going to help you who lost a daughter or son heal or bring them back? It doesn't. You can't bring them back. You're not going to heal from that act.
Mhm.
Two lives are lost. A professor at in Indiana, I forgot his first name, his last name is Stith, said the death penalty doesn't pay a debt to society. It merely kills the debtor.
Oof.
And it's true.
Yeah.
So that's how I approach it, and that's how I think that we should all approach it, really.
Let me ask you this, Your Grace. What was it like for you personally to advocate so publicly for someone that so many had condemned on both a social and emotional level? What churned inside of you? You've said some of the things, but you might want to add a little more to it.
Yeah, it was rough because seeing people in my own church, I got hate letters,
Oof.
uh, anonymous hate mail. I got anonymous letters saying things about HIV and AIDS that was ugly. Even within the task force, one day someone said, well, children having AIDS is different. No, it's not. It's a
Mm.
disease. It's not different.
Yeah.
Um, Beyond the hate mail and the challenges, it was difficult because I never expected the church and those in the church to act like that. I never thought they would. I thought we were beyond that, but then I woke up.
Yeah.
I woke up and said, wow, this is reality. And doing the right thing has its cost. And sometimes you pay that cost, you pay that price at a dear cost to yourself. Is it worth it? Absolutely. Would I do it again? 100%. Standing up for righteousness and the marginalized and doing what's right far outweighs any political or ecclesiastical honors that one might get by going along.
Your Grace, now that you've lived through these most powerful moments of ministry, what would you say to anyone who feels called to serve in hard and misunderstood places?
They need to be prepared for backlash. They need to be prepared for criticism within and without the church, and to stay strong and to keep Christ in the forefront of their ministry. I would hope that our seminarians and our seminary encourages its students to read Grace Unbound. It really describes the struggles of putting what we learn into actions, to move, as we say, from theoria to praxis. And sometimes we don't do that very well, oftentimes. But I think I'm hoping that this book would inspire, especially seminarians, to do so. Some of my early readers, my Protestant friends who read it, would like it to be mandatory reading in their seminaries as well. So I'm very impressed with that. And I think that anybody who feels called to social justice and activism needs to do it through the lens, in our situation anyhow, the lens of orthodoxy, through our theology, our spirituality. All that plays into who we are as a church and as a people. But be prepared for people lashing out. Christ himself said it, they hated me before they hated you. And we need to be prepared for that.
They hated me without a cause, right?
That's right. They hated
Yeah.
me without a cause.
Grace Unbound, the Sacred Activism of an Orthodox Bishop. Where can listeners learn more and purchase your book?
Oh, it's on Amazon, first of all. So
Okay.
you can get it there. It's $32 for a hardback. I think there's a Kindle version, which is less expensive. Also, you can go through my website to connect to it. You can find more about the book on my website. It's a very simple website. It's Bishop Demetrios, DEMETRIOS.com. And if you go there, you'll find the book. You'll also find more about the book, and you'll find about the endorsers like Sister Prejean, who wrote Dead Man Walking, heaped praise upon the book. George Stephanopoulos, Peter Staley, who was an early AIDS activist and not very church oriented, had some amazing things to say about the book. So I'm really happy with those three, especially. Others, like Michael Kinnaman, the former executive secretary of the National Council of Churches, you'll see all that on the website.
Okay, good.
I'm very, very proud of that that website. So they should go there,
Very,
bishopdemetrius.com.
very good. Thank you, Grace, for being with us today, and thank you for sharing this wonderful book that you have written.
Thank you, Father. It was a complete joy and pleasure to be with you.